The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists Andy Hoffman from Crypto Gold Central,
Oh, thanks for having me. I cannot wait to talk about these topics today.
Gabriel D. Vine from Future Rant,
Hello, Bitcoin. Hello, posterity.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network, reminding you to give us a like and a share. Moving on to issue 1. Issue 1. Bitcoin's price was artificially inflated, fueling skyrocketing value, researchers say. A paper released by the University of Texas this week claimed that Tether was used to manipulate the price of altcoins. The altcoins were then sold for Bitcoin, which was sold for USD, and then for Tether again. If this is true, the price of Bitcoin at 20,000 may be false. This has injected much fear, uncertainty, and doubt into the market. Additionally, a paper released by CryptoMedication on Medium that may or may not be true claims that a cartel in Bitcoin was secretly manipulating the price, causing the price to rise to an all-time high of $20,000. Andy Hoffman, is this true? And what does it mean for the price of Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, it's just so funny to be on the show. I always like when you say, now for the first topic, and then you just wait and wait and wait at the first topic. So I always love that. Keep doing it. As for what this whole Tether thing and all these articles. Okay. First of all, let's dismiss what University of Texas says. I have no interest in what these academics have to say. It's almost laughable. It's like Paul Krugman's and all these guys. No interest in that stuff. And I don't believe for a second that any market was falsely anything. The market got to what it did, just like the stock market, which is rigged, gets to what it does, and the gold market, which is rigged, gets to where it does. Real numbers. And every market is rigged, so you can't say the market is false. And it's so funny, all this talk about how price is manipulated, and of course, who knows more about price manipulation than me? Why do they talk about price manipulation of it going up? Are they not watching all the spoofing on the way down? Are they not watching all the things that have gone on to try to suppress the price, all the insider trading? I mean, it's ridiculous. There is manipulation, but it's not one way. I mean, to talk about it as if it's what happened in December is the manipulation, everything else is real, is ridiculous. In fact, I would say there's far more manipulation to the downside. As for this report, okay, because we're talking about the crypto medicine report, which came out, I guess, this very recently about Tether. Now, I have all along never really fixated on exactly what was going on at Tether. I've been very peripherally aware of it. I've read some stuff about it. Is clearly shady stuff going on between the hacks and the circumstances that created Tether and the fact that it's out there in Hong Kong and there's not a lot of auditing, a lot of red flags, right? Nothing to do with Bitcoin, it has to do with Bitfinex. But because I was in this show, you sent me this article.
That's right, Andy. It's always something attached to Bitcoin that has the problem. It's never Bitcoin itself. It's Bitfinex or Crypto or BTC-E or Coinbase. Right. They always build something on top of Bitcoin. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. And in this case, I read this entire report this morning, which is very long. If it's true, and I'm guessing that a large part of it is true, fantastic investigative journalism, for one. I have one word in my mind for what I think Bitfinex is, which verified in spades what I had initially heard about it, and that's Enron. There's clearly unbelievably shady things going on there, but there's no way of proving exactly what is true inside of that article and what is not. Also, the implications, look, as much as I don't like some of these people, it's like a legion of doom of Bitcoin bad people like the Roger Veras and Eric Voorhees. A lot of it is circumstantial, a lot of it is innuendo. Again, is no real proof, but there's clearly some really shady stuff going on there. And at the same time, it doesn't necessarily prove that that's why the price went up. Of course, they don't talk about why the price went down. So, and as to whether it's FUD for now, I really don't think that this is a new story. I think, I was just listening to your fantastic appearance. You and Ansel were talking about it on the Bitcoin Meister show. I think the market is in a downtrend. We're still consolidating this, this big bubble jump that we had. And so anything could be taken as FUD, but I don't think this specific story is anything new. But I do think that anyone who keeps their coins inside of Bitfinex is crazy.
Especially after Bitfinex had the hack, printed their own debt token, somehow managed to pay back their own debt token at far less money than they actually lost in the hack, far less debt than they were supposed to pay to their people. And now the Tether problem. We do seem to have a lot of problems coming from Bitfinex.
And you know what, again, I'll say one more thing. You have so many altcoins that only trade on exchanges, and you can only hold them on exchanges as opposed to like Bitcoin, you can hold offline. And it just screams of how much risk there is of holding on an exchange at all, but let alone holding illiquid securities, or we'll get to that one later, illiquid altcoins on exchanges. I mean, seriously, there is so much risk in the sector to start with. That's why I only hold Bitcoin, and I hold it on a Trezor. It's that simple.
Gabriel Divine.
First of all, I'd like to say excellent lava lamp, Andy. Very stoked that you've got that on. Maybe turn it on for the next
cocktail.
show.
See, my cocktail game table has every game from the 1980s too.
Oh, sick! It's the tabletop. I'll play you Miss Pac-Man when I come to visit Colorado.
I hope you do. My daughter will play with you.
Fantastic. All right. This is amazing. This is quite a crew you got here. And you know what else is amazing? The fact that you read through this white paper. That's great. Bitcoin is such a broad and deep topic. There's so many things going on. There's the economics, the game theory, the software side, the political posturing, everything. And there's always the new developments and the old bug fixes and the fights and everything. And it's impossible for one person to keep up with everything. And Tether is one of those things that I've been kind of like, watching from the sidelines. It's, as Thomas pointed out, something that's kind of ancillary to Bitcoin. It's related, but it's certainly not directly part of Bitcoin. So this is great. This is our opportunity to familiarize the audience. Anybody who's not that familiar with Tether, I'm going to ask some newbie questions. The two of you can answer. And maybe we can all learn something here. Except for Andy, who's obviously very well versed on the topic. So,
I'm not well versed on what's going on at Bitfinex, but I did read this paper, and any layman reading this paper would be scared off. And there's no way you could make up so many lies.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's not what I meant. I just meant, being able to understand what's going on in the paper. You have to understand how the basic system is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to explain what Tether is, and I'm probably going to do a bad job. So jump in and correct me when I fuck up. So Tether is a cryptographic token created by the Bitfinex Bitcoin exchange.
Other people, maybe not them directly. It's pretty complicated, but
yeah. Oh, right. Some shell companies, whatever, various legal
related
entities
to the exchange, and that's part of the conspiracy theory. Is did Bitfinex directly control Tether? Did they tangentially control Tether? Do they have nothing to do with it? I mean, we need more information.
Right. They're at least tangentially involved, whether they're controlling or own it. And we just saw a great comment from Jeremy in the chat. Tether is Ether with a T in front. Pretty different from Ethereum. It's a good joke, but it's actually pretty different from Ethereum, of course. It doesn't have a blockchain. There's no miners. It's just what they call a stable coin, which is it's pegged to another asset, in this case, the US dollar, to enable various exchanges, including Bitfinex, I think, to allow trading between crypto assets and the dollar on an abstract basis. So the idea is, I believe, that Bitfinex buys a bunch of dollars, essentially, throw them in the bank, and then create these tokens and give them out to people, or sell them to people, essentially, for usually for crypto. So basically the idea is that it represents these dollars that are in the bank. Now, of course, that's very similar to the fractional reserve system we have now, which is actually completely legal, unlike Tether if they're doing this. But if they're faking having these bank balances, then obviously that's a problem, because then that means that they're creating money out of thin air. And so what I think when I heard about this, I thought, okay, well, that's a definite vector for fraud, but it could be also a really interesting experiment for Bitfinex, or for whoever's creating it, to for example, for Bitfinex specifically as an exchange. They've got a bunch. It's a totally centralized exchange, like most of them are. It's completely what they call custodial, where the exchange is holding all the assets that are being traded in their computers, in their database, and they control all the private keys to your crypto when you send it to them. It's not your crypto; you just have a claim. And so therefore, when an exchange gets hacked, all the users that were storing, quote unquote, their assets on there lose their money, because it's custodial. They didn't have custody of it during that time. So what I've been thinking, and this is maybe beside the point a little bit, but an exchange that creates a token like this can actually do interesting things on an internal level, besides the fraud of just sort of issuing it from nowhere and using that to influence markets and then make bets and be able to benefit off of the price manipulation. You can also do interesting things, like, even if you aren't doing any fraud, like holding some of the, like, gambling and holding some of the value of your tethers in a different asset besides the dollar, such as the euro. Or you could hedge the dollar and try to make a profit off of it. So let's say you're Tether.com or whatever, the controlling company, and you've issued $100 million worth of Tether, and you tell everybody, "Hi, we have $100 million in our Tether bank accounts," and everyone goes, "Yay, you've got that." But on the backside, they could, other than just only holding 50 million and just faking the rest, they could also hold, say, 90 million in Bitcoin, and $90 million, and then 10 million in Bitcoin, and gamble that the price of Bitcoin will go up or something like that. So it's an interesting opportunity for the controller of the tethers to gamble, essentially, and possibly wipe everything out if they gamble wrong, right? Because then they won't have anything to sell in order to in order to support the peg to the dollar. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, is that pretty much correct?
That's pretty good. I'd say anyone who prints their own money suddenly gets a bunch of power because they printed their own money. So I don't know that Tether started out as a fractional reserve. It might have started out as a one-to-one. It's interesting to note it started out on the Mastercoin platform, which is now Omni, which was actually before the ERC20 token. So you might think it's an ERC20, but it's not. And that yeah, we don't know what happened with Tether, but we do know that the exchanges love and want this idea of a stable coin. Like Gabriel was saying, it enables many things other than fraud. It's great for fraud too, though. But you can do arbitrage. You could sell Bitcoin on one exchange for dollars, put the dollars on another exchange, buy Bitcoin, sell it. You could do some kind of arbitrage loop like that, which is legal and acceptable in the market.
And the whole point of the whole point of Tether is to allow exchanges that don't do any that don't have any licenses to have fiat exchange happening on their platform, pure crypto exchanges. It allows them to trade a simulacrum of the dollar and get around those regulations, and it makes it easier and more liquid.
The only way that you're going to see fiat on a decentralized exchange, something that exists nowhere, where right now you can go Bitcoin for Litecoin or whatever. Bitcoin for this fiat token is going to be the closest you're going to get to fiat, but you always have to trust someone holding this money in the bank account. When they print more of them, you have to trust them again. We've covered Tether before. We didn't have such an alarmist negative market feeling about it. It seemed tangential. We could say things like, I like Bitcoin, F Tether, I don't like them. But still, they affect the rest of us, even if we don't like what they're doing. And it seems, all these things are connected. So go ahead, Andy.
Well, and we'll get to that part after, because I'm not sure I necessarily agree with you, although I understand that in a bear market situation, all news is bad news. And yes, there's a negative impact that can get into Bitcoin, but that's another topic. But the whole thing is this discussion has brought to my mind. I'm just thinking now about Tether. I've always tried to avoid it because I own Bitcoin. I tell people to buy Bitcoin. I tell people to hold their own keys. I really have nothing to do with Bitfinex. So I try to have ignored it. But now when I think about it, it's funny, you're calling it, it's being called a fractional reserve. And I'm saying, think of who I am. I spent my entire career railing against fractional reserve in every way, in every market, and whether it's in precious metals or the stock market or banking in general. But to me, fractional reserve is an amazing thing compared to what Tether is. Tether's not fractional reserve. Tether is this shady company, which has had all kinds of problems in Hong Kong, no less, with no regulation of any kind, is supposedly, without auditing, through this shell company Polish bank that has no assets, is supposedly holding hundreds of millions of dollars and has the authority to make or break these Tether tokens, like to print them or get rid of them. That's not fractional reserve. That's just insanity. And we don't even know who it is. Is it one person? Is it two entities? This is like a complete disaster, this whole Tether situation. Why anyone would hold Tethers? Yeah, I know you want to be able to get out of Bitcoin so you can buy Ethereum or buy a crap coin back and forth. But the whole point is there's absolutely no controls on this thing at all. And it's run by very shady entities without regulation. I cannot imagine how anyone could hold any of their assets in this Tether thing. The more I read about it, and again, I don't even know what in this report is true and what's not true. Some of it is clearly true. Some of it is proven to be true. Some of it is just speculation. Some of it is innuendo. But I mean, it's almost the only reason it's legal is because there's no regulations in the crypto industry. If there was, let's say the SEC, well, the SEC has no jurisdiction over Hong Kong, but let's say the Hong Kong exchange or the Hong Kong secure regulation people said, yes, these are securities, we're going to regulate them. The first thing they would do would be to audit Bitfinex by mandate and probably find all kinds of terrible things. So, it's a huge black eye on the industry in general, but the beauty of it is it's nothing to do with Bitcoin. I mean, nothing. To me, because you were saying on Adam's show that you think that it's like something that will keep institutions out of Bitcoin, and I don't think really it matters at all. I think it will keep them out of some of these shady exchanges, and it will make them think twice about holding any like cryptocurrencies on exchanges that aren't like strictly regulated, like say the Gemini, but. Two different topics, but I just can't believe this Tether is around in this form. It's just vile when you read about what it is.
But Andy, what if I was to give you a preview of coming attractions and to tell you that the Goldman Sachs backed Circle is now planning USDC, the Circle dollar backed token, basically the same thing as Tether, but this time you trust Circle instead of trusting whatever company Tether was.
I'd probably, again, you talk about flipping my views all around. I would trust the Goldman Sachs token more than I would trust the Bitfinex token, because at least Goldman Sachs is a regulated U.S. company. Bitfinex is, what is it? It's in the middle of basically, China with no regulation. We don't even know who owns it. But yeah, no, I wouldn't trust Goldman Sachs either. That's why any Bitcoin I have, I immediately take it away from the exchanges, never to bring it back. But that's how bad I think Bitfinex is, that I would rather hold my money at Goldman Sachs 1,000 times over before putting anything at Bitfinex.
And it is a good comparison. It was great that you had to defend Goldman Sachs. But Gabriel Devine, any more on this topic before we go to the exit question? Good to go. All right. The exit question.
No, I do have something more.
Oh, you got more? Okay, well, you have to talk more.
I just wanted to say, and this just to quickly extend on what Andy was saying, any fraud in Tether and Bitfinex is so in proportion to and how it relates to Bitcoin is so incredibly minuscule compared to the fraud in traditional old finance that is absolutely systemic from the very core of its entire existence, its basis on central banking. It's fraud from the ground up, completely fraudulent from the very roots of the entire philosophical underpinnings to how it's carried out, to fractional reserve banking, to all the manipulated markets, to all the faked, supply of fiat, fake supply of, basically what we would call colored coins in crypto is basically these, paper certificates that are all kept in one place, and there's total double spends, quadruple spends happening all the time on these traditional markets. That is, and of course the size of the markets is whatever 10,000 or 100,000 times larger. So I mean, this is such a minor thing, and it's really hilarious to see all the no coiners out there, seizing on this white paper, like, oh look, the price went up inorganically. It was forced because of this other fraud thing, and that's the only reason why Bitcoin went up, which is patently ridiculous. Here we are, floating on this price 600% higher than it was a year ago. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
I mean, are people watching again? You look at what's happening. Like, look in the gold market today, right when the COMEX opened. Even for what I've seen, $34 billion of notional paper gold hit at once. $34 billion. That's like multiples of how much gets produced, and no one seems to care about that. The ECB comes out yesterday and says, "Yay, we're going to end QE 18 months from now." And we're going to end NERP, which we've had for 4 years, negative interest rates, next year. And all the other currencies in the world crash. The dollar explodes, the euro goes down a little bit, and all the emerging market currencies crash. And it was all, they had the inside information on this, of course. They knew that they were going to do this. And of course, the stock market never goes down no matter what. And the bonds are supported by this QE. But no one seems to care about that. They just care about this. And frankly, I don't believe for a second that the Bitcoin price was taken up because of Tether. I think that's a small part, maybe, but it's just one. Look, it was a massive bull run, and every imaginable force on earth was buying it. And then when you turn around, every force is selling it. And you could say right now, well, tethers are somehow responsible for the price going down, but it's just a part of rigged markets everywhere. Bitcoin is obviously manipulated. In some ways, it's a different kind of manipulation, and we'll just have to see how it plays out over time.
I think that moves well into the exit question. Exit question on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning absolutely nothing, 10 meaning absolute existential crisis. How important is this Tether manipulation story to Bitcoin? Andy Hoffman.
Well, during bear market conditions, it's closer to a 5 or 6 just because everyone's looking for bad news on everything. During bull market conditions, as we saw, it's a 1. No one cares.
Gabriel D. Vine.
Yeah. Let's see. You said 1 is 0 effect. Why don't we have 0? So I can say 1.
You can choose 0 if you want.
Okay. Well, no. I mean, because I think it's 1.1. Let's say there's a slight, very, very hair of an effect on the general Bitcoin ecosystem. It might have a little bit more of an effect on the short-term price, but that's not really doesn't affect. Blocks are still being found, people. 1.1.
The answer is 8. 8. Moving on to issue 2. SEC official pushes back on claims that Ethereum is a security. In a shocking announcement this week, the SEC announced that Ethereum was not a security, saying in his statement that today the agency doesn't see a lot of value in treating Ether as a security, explaining that according to the SEC, there is no central figure or group responsible for Ethereum. Therefore, the assets may not represent an investment contract. What's so shocking about this statement is while denying that Ethereum isn't a security, the SEC is claiming that other ICOs may be security. However, it seems like they have no legs to stand on. Gabriel D. Vine, what do you think? Was the SEC right? Is Ethereum not a security?
There's been a lot of talks about this Howey test thing, which is the criteria by which the Securities and Exchange Commission decides whether, their edict on whether a given asset is a specific, carries a specific legal definition. And I understand why they're doing that. It's because they have to name it stuff in order for law enforcement to then, enforce laws. and enforce regulations, and force various companies to do all sorts of stuff, and different people to do different things. And really, I think it's just an extension of fraudulent use for law. I really don't think laws should be used for anything other than when people's what they call negative rights are being how do I put it? When people's negative rights are what's the word I'm looking for? Are offended, right? So or transgressed. So negative rights is it's the silver rule: don't do unto others as you don't wish to be done unto you, right? So this is Blake Anderson here on the Bitcoin group turned me on to negative rights. They're the rights that everyone can agree on. Everyone agrees on these rights because everyone doesn't want to be shot in the face or stabbed or have their car stolen or whatever. Of course, at the edges of that, you do get into gray areas, but like securities regulation is so far from that gray area, it's just ridiculous. So my general point is governments love to create more and more laws. You notice they rarely repeal laws because, first of all, obviously they're power hungry. So they want to, the more laws they are, the more opportunities they have to force other people to do things to their liking. And the other issue is, obscurity through complexity. There are so many laws that nobody could possibly know all of them. And so it's quite often that, you will, anybody who doesn't have huge amounts of money to pay a cadre of lawyers is going to run afoul of XYZ law. And governments love that because then they can choose to enforce the law selectively against their political enemies or against people who might undermine their power. So that's the raison d'etre of the SEC. Anybody who doesn't bribe them properly or doesn't give them the right kickbacks or doesn't give them the job when they leave the office, it's rampant. This revolving door. You're basically asking to be cracked down on. So Ethereum has big backers. They've got these Silicon Valley douchebags. They've got Coin Center and all these people that are playing ball with the authorities that have their back. And it's pretty. I mean, it's very subjective when you're. Especially if you're judging a new type of asset like crypto assets, whether they fit into some XYZ old, old definition. Look at Ansel Lindner. In his opinion, Ethereum, because it had this pre-mine. So I don't know if you guys know this, but you guys do, but our listeners, not everybody probably knows this, but back in 2013, 14, Ethereum raised a bunch of money in Bitcoin, and did a pre-mine of like 70 million Ether that they distributed to the founders and to the foundation as well, which is a Swiss company. It's a privately held Swiss corporation. That company owns essentially 40% of the current Ether supply. So this is basically declared not a security because some guys in suits convinced them that Ethereum is somehow decentralized, even though it has numerous figureheads that have exercised their power quite heavily and caused a hard fork a couple of years ago. But then again, it's it's totally arbitrary anyways, because it all depends on how much you've bribed them, who you know. I'm sure there's all sorts of different assets out there that would have passed the Howey test if the wrong kickbacks were given. If somebody had been killed before making the decision, if the bribe didn't get through in time, whatever it is. So this is it's a systemic fraud situation with the SEC, and I don't think their decision is relevant taken on its own level. However, there are broader implications here. Of course, they didn't even consider Bitcoin because it's not even close to a security. That thing, the foundation folded because all the users attacked it politically. So it won't even brook having a foundation represent it, because we're like, no, you don't represent my needs. Get out of my hair. So, but I think it is a relevant decision, because it does open the floodgates for a lot more projects and a lot more fraud. But I mean, I think it's anytime the government decides not to act, it's an unequivocal good. So that's nice, I guess, but I don't know, kind of irrelevant in that other sense.
Gabriel, I think you're making my point for me here. Ethereum was a Swiss company. They have this strange structure where you have to buy the ether to get the gas to run the smart contract. That's called structuring. They set that up as a legal structure. It's not a technical need. They don't need that. They could just sell you the gas directly, but they structured it because they didn't want to be a security. They went to Switzerland because they didn't want to be a security, and they had that huge pre-mine that went to the early people. Those are the leaders. That's the company. That's who you sue. I think it's very unfortunate that the SEC is not doing their job here, that they've decided that it's too big to fail, so they're walking away. As we predicted on this show, they should have acted sooner when it was not too big to fail. They should have protected consumers, because now they have no legs to stand on attacking other ICOs. I don't see any difference between any ICO and Ethereum. They built a platform. Everyone will build a platform. It's not difficult. And I just think it's unfortunate. As I mentioned on the Adam Meister show this morning, John Carvalho, Bitcoin Eralog of Exotica TV, had a couple of tweets about this. And he said he could have launched his own ICO, but he thought it would be a security. He thought that the law would come down on him, and he did what he thought was the right thing in following the law. Now we have a situation where the people who flouted the law, the people who said, we will do what we want, are getting off scot-free. There was that other tweet I referred to by Barry Silbert where he said the entire crypto community, not myself, the entire crypto community breathed a sigh of relief when this went through. And I wonder why. I wonder if you were doing questionable things. I wonder if you thought that what you were doing was illegal and then got away with it. So I have a lot of questions about this decision. It's not official. This is a statement by an SEC official. This is not in stone, but it shows the direction of their thinking, the direction in which they're heading. Andy, what do you think? Is it too big to fail?
Yeah, it is. Well, put it this way. The term that comes to mind when I think of regulation of cryptocurrency is herding cats, meaning it's impossible. So let's say they said it's a security. Well, so what? What are you going to do? How are you going to stop it? It's not even like it's not like a U.S. stock that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange. It's traded on like 200 cryptocurrency exchanges around the world, many of them in countries that couldn't care less. Some of them like cryptocurrency. And I mean, I just don't understand the concept. I mean, yes, the initial, those sales you're talking about in the past, yeah, those were clearly security sales. For what though? I mean, it's like kind of like a nonprofit corporation. They don't really do anything except build a computer program. It's not like they have quarterly profit reports and the CEO gets paid a salary. But yes, it was a securities offering, but Ethereum itself is whether it's centralized or not, it's not a security. And what are you going to do with it either way? I mean, you're going to tell Kraken and Coinbase you can't sell it anymore. They'll say, fine, people just buy it somewhere else. I mean, I don't understand. And then of course the bigger joke is, well, if Ethereum is not a security, then what is Bitcoin? I mean, again, like Gabriel said, I mean, why would you even comment? You would sound unbelievably stupid because it's so amorphous and it has never had leadership and it has never sold anything. You know, the whole thing is silly to me. You know, like you were talking about that on Adam's show, again, when you're in these kind of bear market conditions, if they said it was a security, everything crashes because it's so horrible, even though like for Bitcoin, like who cares? I mean, what does that mean? They're going to regulate it? Are they going to say to Coinbase, people can't buy it on Coinbase anymore? They already have AML KYC. So what exactly is there to regulate? The whole story is a non-story to me. I'm certainly relieved that they didn't say they're doing something only because right now everyone's looking for excuses to sell. But to me, the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way to regulate cryptocurrency. And by the way, you're talking about ICOs. ICOs are even more amorphous. They're all over the world. Of course, there's securities. but they're in unregulated markets all over the world. They can be sold by people in all different parts of the world. The whole thing is ridiculous. You can't regulate these things. You can regulate exchanges, and then other ones will pop up elsewhere.
Well, and I think that's the SEC's job, to regulate exchanges. And you do it just like you would do any other criminal investigation. You seize the exchange, you count how many illegal transactions you did, and then you charge them for the illegal transactions. I was not aware that if you get over 1 million illegal transactions, you get a get out of jail free card. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of other horrible things where if they just did enough of it, it's fine. So I worry about that kind of law.
But I don't think it's a matter of like letting the criminals get away. It's a brand new industry that's like a hydra. Like there's just so many aspects of it. There's so many different things being sold, whether they're ICOs or altcoins or airdrops or forks. There's just too much stuff going on. Much of it has nothing to do with jurisdictions. Like is the Bcash fork, which is like this theoretically big taxable event. Well, what exactly is it from a tax perspective? Is it even a U.S. event? The point is that the government is going to find as time passes. I think they already know it. That's kind of why they made this statement, that there's not much that they can do about cryptocurrency. And the job owning will only work so much. And in this case, I think they chose the wise decision not to poke a hornet's nest.
I definitely agree. It would be almost impossible for them to enforce any kind of action on Ethereum and the market, but I'd like to see them try. And just because it's really difficult, I don't think that they have a right as their job to walk away from the law and shrug their shoulders and say it's difficult. I think either you have to change the laws or admit, like Andy said, that it's not possible. And that's a huge advertisement for Bitcoin and Ethereum, that it's not possible for the government to regulate it, which we've been saying, but they have not said.
And with all due respect, we are talking about U.S. regulators here. They are the criminals. I mean, to say that we need the SEC and the CFTC, who have been allowing unbelievable amounts of market manipulation since the dawn of time, more than ever before, say we need them to come in and regulate a market. No. What we need is them to disappear completely, because anything that they touch turns to lead. And I don't want them going anywhere near any market. I mean, I'd rather watch the scammy ICOs, do their thing and let people lose money in them because they're crazy enough to invest in them. That's how real capitalism works. If you're crazy enough to invest in an ICO by some stranger and lose your money, that's on you. The SEC is not going to change that.
Exactly, Thomas. I can't believe you're so naive as to think these people like have others' best interest in mind. This whole thing was set up for fraudulent reasons. They didn't catch Bernie Madoff for years, and that was so transparent.
I've spent my whole life reporting on rigged markets. They've done everything they can. They literally have destroyed the precious metal market, the only sound money alternative that we ever had until Bitcoin came around, because the CFTC was complicit in this the whole time, and the SEC with the GLD and all the options and future. It's a horror show. The stock market supported the bond markets with QE. These are the bad guys. The less they say, the better. So frankly, I am thrilled that they didn't butt their mouth in, and I don't want them touching anything. I would just assume that they all die.
Well, I'm not looking to defend a 60 or 80-year-old bureaucracy here, and I'm not crazy about any of the recent decisions that you guys mentioned, but I do think back to the beginnings of the stock market, the 1920s and the 30s, when there were these scams and where businesses were out of control and they're ripping off people. And I think that these institutions and laws were brought in to try to limit the amount of damage done to these people.
All those frauds were created by the same people so that they could bring in more people to prevent the small guys from doing the frauds. It was a way for them to gain public acceptance of the creation of these additional regulatory bodies so that they could keep the small guys and their political enemies out of the game of creating the frauds and give the green light to only their frauds.
Yeah, I mean, look at who the chairman of the SEC. Guess what his former job was? He was the lawyer for Goldman Sachs, and guess who his wife is? One of the top portfolio managers at Goldman Sachs. The whole CFTC board was a whole collection of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. The job of these big banks is to run these regulatory agencies, like Gabriel says, so that they get all the rules slanted toward them. And the reason they don't like Bitcoin is because it's a competitor to a system that they win in. But the beauty of Bitcoin, thankfully, is there's nothing they could do about it. I mean, Jamie Dimon could say it's like tulips, and everyone laughs at him because it's just a lie and everyone knows it. But no, these regulatory agencies are the evil. I mean, they are who we should be most focused on as far as who is trying to get us. But thankfully, they cannot attack Bitcoin.
And whether you guys approve of them or not, we do look to them to create the new regulations. They created the original regulations. If there were to be new regulations, they would come from these bodies, whether you'd like them, whether they'd work, all of those questions.
We don't look to them. They still hold
the natural thing. I mean, it's still going to happen. Like, they're going to pass laws.
In Ethereum,
you could hate Congress, but Congress is going to pass laws.
Yeah, but since when is the SEC the Ethereum regulator? I mean, they are a Securities and Exchange Commission. They regulate stock and bond markets. Cryptocurrencies are not stocks and bonds. And these people, by the way, know absolutely nothing about cryptocurrency. I mean, literally nothing about them. So how could they be in charge of creating laws about something that it's like impossible to create laws about in the first place, and they don't even understand them? I mean, very few people in the world. Look, the fact that I am considered like one of these top cryptocurrency experts, and I know so little, and these guys literally know nothing. So, how could they? Why would we look to them to create laws? We can't create laws because we don't even have enough experts to create laws, and this is too complicated of a subject. So I'm just happy when they just shut up.
And not to get too far into the other topics, but we do look to the FCC to regulate new things like the internet, when they used to regulate old things like radio and television.
No, we don't. Not all of us look to them.
I mean,
they have the power still.
Like, it's like drones. Like, drones are invented, and then we assume that the FAA is going to pass drone laws. I don't assume that the FDA is going to pass drone laws. I look to the Food and Drug Association.
No, we're gritting our teeth.
Like, come on, guys. Like, what are we like?
We're gritting our teeth
against the definitions of government. Like, I mean, government exists.
Looking to them is not how everybody looks at it.
Well, it's going to have. I mean, it's like you have to look to the baseball people to tell you about the draft. You're going to look to the FAA to regulate the skies. I invented a flying machine, and then I looked to the FDA. I'm just trying to understand what you guys are arguing here.
I'm just arguing semantics, really. Looking to them means that you feel like you don't have permission already, whereas in my opinion, a more sanguine approach is to recognize that they still hold that authority whether you like it or not, and accept the fact that they have greater power than you.
And of course, look, there are some things that are easier to classify than others. A quote flying machine is not a complex thing. I mean, yes, drones have issues with them, but they are pretty easy to understand what they are. Cryptocurrency, and again, you're talking about this Bitcoin, and then there's centralized altcoins, and a lot of altcoins, by the way, are a lot less centralized per se. You're talking about like from a securities description than you'd like, and then of course you have ICOs, which is something completely different. So, I mean, you can't regulate everything. The world is becoming more complex. The world of money is becoming. I mean, look, they're trying to regulate derivatives and all these things that only a handful of computer experts understand at Goldman Sachs, and the government's trying to regulate that. Now they're going to try to regulate this. You can't regulate everything. The biggest problem, the reason we have Bitcoin in the first place, the reason it created was big government. The reason that I was in gold all these years and why I'm in Bitcoin now, big government is causing all the world's problems. They're the ones who are causing the wealth inequality. They're the ones who are causing the debt, the inflation, all of these things. So to say, hey, here's some more things to try to regulate and screw up, things that are so complex that almost nobody understands what they even are.
But Andy, in Thomas's world, there are no psychopaths that are all highly attracted to these positions of power at the top of hierarchy. There are no psychopaths, so you can just set up these things and just depend on everybody's goodwill to do right in those positions of power.
It's not just that, but you just mentioned big government. It's the gorilla in the room. I'm not going to assume that the gorilla is not going to pass a law, and I'm not going to look next to the gorilla for the law. I'm going to look right at the gorilla and look for the next law.
Oh, I
There's
got
going
it,
to be
Thomas.
another law.
Thomas,
Like, I
Fuck
mean,
that, man. We're looking at ways to take down that gorilla, man.
But,
you
you know,
might want, you might give up in the face of that growling, but we don't. We're looking
I'm not even talking about whether they're good or bad people or whether they're sociopaths or not. I'm saying they could have saints in there. They could have a group of Mother Teresas in there, but they still have no clue what cryptocurrency is. So you can look and say and do something, but I mean, you were talking about the blind leading the blind. They have no idea what it is. And if they try to regulate it, it's only going to make the situation worse for the government trying to regulate it. It's going to just confuse a lot of people, cause a lot of problems. So
in that sense, it was
I think the libertarians would say states got a state. So
Right,
I do expect them to regulate them. I look to them to regulate them. I expect them to regulate. I don't know that it's going to work, but I don't look to someone else to regulate them. I mean, I look to.
I'm not looking at anybody to regulate nothing. Just
it's going to happen though. I mean, it's like it's a
bad things to me, and I won't do bad things to you.
Look into the future of Bitcoin and imagine all the governments left it alone for 100 years. Does that seem likely? Or all the governments passed laws about it and they failed, and then there's a period where the laws were enforced, and then the laws went away, and then there's an acceptance period. I think we're going to have to go through that. I mean,
yes, absolutely. It's a long period of time. Governments don't sit. But the point is, it is a decentralized revolution. That's what people need to understand. We are still very early. We want to believe, hey, we won the war. The price went to 20,000 last year. It's going to go right back, and everything's going to be great. There's the whole status quo that doesn't want this to happen.
Right.
And so they will fight. But fortunately, if you are hodling on a Trezor, there's not much they could do about it except cause bumps along in the road. But the beauty of it is this whole Bitcoin thing is a fight back against big government, and it will be a long, drawn out process. I mean, I suppose if you had a giant, like they lost control of financial markets, and there was a giant like 2008 like crisis now, then that could really accelerate the movement out of fiat and into it. But without that, it's going to be a bumpy road. And
I think you made a really good point earlier, and in a sense, you're talking about how they don't understand Ethereum and stuff, and I'm sure it's very, very few people.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know, but there might be just enough people that do to have told them you don't want to try to regulate this because you won't be able to. Even though there's a company in Switzerland, even though this thing it was a pre-mine and it's basically a security. We can't. There's no way we'll be able to really enforce this. Even if we go after the company in Switzerland, it's going to be a losing battle, and we're going to lose face. So I think a lot of the decision was motivated by them just not wanting to lose face, and I think that's part of the reason why they're not going after Bitcoin too, because they know that it's not really going to.
And I think this blends well into the exit question. Question: if Ethereum is not a security, then all ICOs are not a security. Yes or no? Andy Hoffman.
I'm just thinking about the way you asked it. ICOs are securities, and Ethereum was sold as, well, ICOs, a lot of them are meant to be securities. Like, this is just a way of getting around traditional markets. So they're literally saying, we are securities, we're just skirting the laws. But Ethereum was not sold. The offering was what you would call a securities offering because people were paying for something from a centralized group. But what Ethereum does is not a company. So I don't know how you'd classify it, and that's what the SEC is worrying about. But the thing with ICOs is it's not like you apply for them with the SEC. You can be some guy in a basement in China and do an ICO, especially if it's one that's funded with cryptocurrency that's just sent, over the internet. So I don't really know how to answer that question, but I don't think any of it will ever be regulatable.
Gabriel D. Vaughn.
As Propagol in the chat pointed out, Ethereum was an ICO, so it is an ICO token. So I'm going to say that they're going to continue to apply the regulations randomly and according to the whims and bribes that they get.
I agree, and we do look to the lawmakers to write new laws, and that's what they have to do when they're forced to see something they've never regulated before. I agree they don't know about it. Neither did the FCC know about the internet, but they regulated it anyway. So I just see it as more of an eventuality, a hurdle that we have to get over. rather than something that we can avoid by not looking at it or wishing it away. Did you know the World Crypto Network has a podcast and you can subscribe on iTunes? We've got Bitcoin Talk Show, JW Weatherman, The Adam Meister Show, Andy Hoffman, Ansel Linzer, and much, much more on the World Crypto Network podcast. Subscribe today on iTunes. Issue 3. The CIA can neither confirm nor deny that it has documents on Satoshi Nakamoto. A Freedom of Information Act request from Motherboard was sent to the CIA recently, and the CIA came back with a standard and classic CIA response. They can neither confirm nor deny that they have a file on Satoshi Nakamoto. Does this mean that Satoshi Nakamoto is secretly a CIA agent? Does this mean that CIA knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Or does this mean that the CIA has no information and didn't want to say that? Gabriel D. Vine, your thoughts on the CIA and Satoshi Nakamoto?
I'm going to ignore this topic and just talk about conspiracy theories about who created Bitcoin. So the most believable conspiracy theory that I've come across, and I've heard this theory from some insiders as well as from remote viewing people, which I love remote viewing. I think it's so cool. And when you look at new physics and quantum mechanics, it actually makes quite a bit of sense. A lot of people just aren't accepting the fact that consciousness directly affects what we consider to be matter, which is actually just little vibrations and resonances in the ether, not Ethereum ether, the real ether, which Einstein admitted that relativity was not possible without an ether in the 1920s. Anyways, yeah, we have some groans going around in the chat. You're welcome. So here's my conspiracy theory. This is what I've heard. Satoshi Nakamoto is 3 individuals.
The Holy Trinity. I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. The Holy Trinity. They are human males. And we've got 3 different age groups. We've got the economist as the oldest. We've got a cryptographer who's the middle age. And then we've got a developer as the youngest, and computer programming expert or computer science expert as the youngest member of the Trinity. And from what I've heard from these theorists, the old gentleman, it really adds together that this person is the storied financial programmer. I want to get his name right. Yes, Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman wrote tons of bank software all the way back to the 60s, total old school, financial economist. Then the middle guy is going to be like 20 or 30 years younger, looking at maybe like a Wei Dai or Nick Szabo, perhaps, one of the 90s cypherpunk crypto guys. And then the young guy, I'm a little at a loss about that one. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody in his 40s or something. That I'm not so sure, but that's what I've heard. And also, conspiracy people said that they were working hand in hand with the NSA to create this thing, and that that quote unquote Satoshi's coins were originally considered to be, in the hands of the U.S. government, of the NSA. The keys are possibly in the hands of the NSA. They have no plans to use the Bitcoin to break anything or anything like that. Perhaps their plan was, just in case it takes off, then the U.S. government can stick around as sort of if you think of them as a private business, which is how they kind of started with the Constitution and stuff. It's a bit of all the money was coming from, themselves. There was no income tax or anything like that at that time. It was run like a business. So that would be like the starting capital for the U.S. government to exist in a crypto world.
All right, it's a fantastic movie. I want to green light it. I want to keep the plot going.
Great. Who's going to play these leads?
Oh, I don't know. I'm picturing the old guys, but still, I have the plot. So they leak the code illegally. The three of them decide we need to leak this to the internet. Then they realize that the government has stolen the original keys, and now the government is secretly in control of Bitcoin, and their plan to free the people has failed. So they must break back in to the place they work at the CIA or whatever to get back the original code for Satoshi's Bitcoins. Then they destroy them at the end of the movie.
When you
But
say
did they
original
really
code, you
destroy
mean
them?
the private
Yeah.
keys? Is that what you mean?
The private keys, yeah, for the all
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's
Satoshi.
awesome. Then they destroy the coins, they burn them.
They
Yeah,
destroy the coins, but then you're always like, did they really destroy them? Dun, dun,
greenlit.
dun, dun,
It's
dun.
greenlit. Yeah, that's
it's
greenlit.
good. All right, Andy, we got a conspiracy theory movie, and we're going to Hollywood. What do you think about the original topic, which was the CIA and Satoshi Nakamoto?
Right. Well, contrary to what people think, I hate everything that has to do with conspiracy. So, like when I talk about like the gold cartel, I talk about proof, and people don't seem to care as much about that as they do about conspiracy theories. They want to hear about Rothschilds and stuff like that, where there's no proof.
Facts. Facts are overrated. We can't make a movie out of your facts.
Well, you can't have a successful newsletter writing subscription service if you talk about facts. You need to make up stuff. That's why the web bot, that's why all these things are so popular. If you say that you know something that other people don't, people love it. But and this really, to me, there's no story at all. The only story is the miraculousness. I compared it to the the Immaculate Conception, that this incredible asset, which could wind up dominating the monetary world, was created by someone completely anonymous. We have no idea who it is. People could say all they want. Probably some of the people that are mentioned are very likely to be him or in the circle of him because they were the earliest, geniuses, but no one knows. And certainly not the government. They definitely don't know. So I don't really know what the story is here.
Moving on to the exit question. We will learn the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto in 1 year, 5 years, or never. Gabriel Devine.
That's interesting. I think longer. I'm gonna say, let's see, what it's 2018 now. I think we might learn. Yeah, I think we're gonna learn who it is. But it's gonna be like 15 years.
Andy Hoffman.
No, I think it's never. I frankly, at this point, if it is a singular person, his or her, and it's I'm sure it's a he. His coming out would be devastating public relations catastrophe. This person would never be able to live another day in peace, and the civil wars that would break out within Bitcoin over him. I'm trying to think of a movie. There's a movie where someone who was supposed to be long gone comes out and he's very important, and it causes the whole world to change their system of beliefs and all kinds of. No, I don't think he's there, and he also can't touch his coins either. So if he's even alive, I don't think we'll ever find out, and I think he knows better than at this point than to come out.
The answer is never. But of course, I never thought we'd know the identity of Deep Throat. But now we know that it was FBI Director Mark Felt. Moving on to issue 4, AT&T, Time Warner, and Comcast. Media companies continue to merge as AT&T completed their acquisition of Time Warner. Meanwhile, Comcast upped their offer to buy Fox and screw Disney to $65 billion. They're fighting over the X-Men, Spider-Man, and Sky networks in Europe. But what does this mean to you? Well, last year, when the FCC repealed net neutrality, its chairman claimed that companies like Comcast weren't investing in broadband deployment because of uncertainty caused by regulations. That's proven to be utterly false. And meanwhile, Comcast and others are using that cash to gobble up other media companies and merge into giant media conglomerates, part ISP, internet service provider, and part content owner. They now have a stake in the game. They have a reason to slow down your pipes. Andy Hoffman, your thoughts on the media mega mergers and net neutrality?
Well, this is hilarious because, again, my career was Wall Street. I worked 15 years on Wall Street, and basically you can consider my 30 years as Wall Street. But I have so stopped focusing on the stock market other than out of a curiosity to see, does it go up or down? I wasn't even aware of these things. I thought, frankly, when you said the second article, AT&T completes Time Warner, I thought it was like an Onion article, because these are like the two most archaic, pathetic dinosaurs of companies in the world, who are both famous for screwing up absolutely everything they've ever touched. And it was kind of like last week you were talking about, or maybe it was on Vortex show, about IBM having comments about Bitcoin. Like, you're talking about the cutting edge of technology against the least cutting edge. So, I mean, to think of what these two companies are doing, I really don't care. Comcast is also becoming a dinosaur. And let's face it, the story is everyone is trying to compete with Amazon, and they're going to lose. Amazon will destroy all these companies, and I really don't care. I mean, I use Comcast because they have good internet connection. That's the ace they have in up their sleeve. But this is all about fighting against Amazon and Netflix, and ultimately Amazon will destroy everything.
Amazon is really impressive. I read the book about Jeff Bezos, and he is just phenomenal. The way they do business is different than anyone else. I would hate to fight them, but I would also hate to work there. Gabriel, Devon. Sorry, go ahead.
I say, although I would like to see how Disney, I mean, if there's one company in America that I have faith that they will create the optimal strategy, how to maximize whatever they got, it's them, because they are one of the truly great American companies.
And this is a personal story for me, because I'm looking for Disney, who owns Marvel, to get the X-Men and Spider-Man back from Fox. So I do have a skin in the game. Gabriel, Devon, your thoughts on the media and the mega mergers and net neutrality?
I appreciate you mentioning your horse in the race there. That makes sense.
I very much have a bias towards the Marvel comics. Sure.
Right. Well, I just kind of want to speak about some ancillary issues here. First of all, net neutrality, I think, is a totally ridiculous and typical opposite play. Like like what you might say, like, say, taxation. Oh, we're gonna help everybody with this money, but actually, it's a way to to draw off wealth from everybody and give them shitty services back. So net neutrality is a similar thing. It's like, oh, we're going to help all of the bandwidth stay great, and but actually it's going to be a situation where Comcast and all these other companies, whoever pays the government, for the right to do to push data down their pipes are the ones that are going to have the right to do high bandwidth usage. And I think that we're it's this utilities, right, where there's like this idea of the tragedy of the commons. But what I think is that the government should get completely out of the way, and we should be paying we should be paying for these services a little bit more what pay as you go type of term. Like, it's like, if their costs are per data, then we shouldn't be paying for a bandwidth. We should be paying for total downloaded, right? And so I think if it's the government and regulations that are causing the mismanagement and lack of matchup between customers and the owners of the infrastructure. In addition, it's local governments that are causing monopolies and duopolies around in the Western world. You have a situation where and in any given neighborhood, you generally only have one choice in most of the states. And that's terrible for the customers. And that's all because the local authorities decided to give the contract. So if we had a situation with more competition, I think that we would see cheaper prices overall, and the government completely got out of the way. I think net neutrality is a total red herring and fake, totally fake. It's a way for large corporations to take over bandwidth more than they already have with these massive local monopolies. It's for them to continue doing that. But that said, as usual, anytime you try to suppress a market like that, alternatives are going to arise. And I'm really looking forward to long-range mesh network technologies contact point technologies where we're going to have, decentralized, you pay it with the Lightning Network, you pay for your route through, and that's going to finally industrialize internet traffic, which it's totally not right now. So that's going to be great. When we have long-range Wi-Fi, you get 70, 100, 200, 500-mile range Wi-Fi. With anybody can run a node, and this tech is already in existence. Just the infrastructure isn't there, the manufacturing isn't there, the demand isn't there because it's at too rudimentary a level to compete with centralized services among ISPs now. But I don't think that'll always be the case, and I have a feeling that will be on the rise over the next couple of decades, to the point where you'll actually be, unless you're maybe in a dense city, it won't make sense to run cable anywhere because your bandwidth will be so high, bouncing it off of a satellite and paying Satoshis per day or whatever for your ultra high bandwidth. It's just my take.
All right, I am exhausted being the one lone voice fighting the libertarians on net neutrality, but I will continue. Just a basic recap of my opinion on net neutrality. It was a concept not created by government, but created by engineers. The idea of a level playing field where all bandwidth is equal is the idea of the internet. This level playing field allowed new companies to upseat old companies. In the new system that they're proposing without net neutrality, you pay for a fast lane. Paying for a fast lane means that when Facebook came along and tried to get rid of MySpace, MySpace would be entrenched. They would have millions of dollars. They could afford lots of fast lane. Facebook would be new. They would be small. They would not have millions of dollars. They could not afford fast lane. So this ends innovation on the internet. It makes it difficult for a company built in a garage to challenge a big company and even to overturn them, as Facebook is now in the home of Sun Microsystems, the creators of Java. Additionally, the companies that provide the bandwidth to the internet are not just ISPs, internet service providers, they are content owners. As I mentioned, the Time Warner merger, the Comcast merger, these companies own media properties. So it's better for them if you watch Comcast TV than if you watch Netflix. So they make Comcast TV fast, included with your service. Netflix costs more. Netflix goes out of business. The net neutrality creates a level playing field. A level playing field is a socialist idea, but one that we benefit from. It's not a law that the government can change. I keep hearing the government is going to use net neutrality to change these companies. No, the government keeps a level playing field. Everyone can compete. That's how we built the internet. It's sad to see this happen. We've lost other incredible democratizing technologies such as radio and television to this same slow walk back. At first, everyone had their own radio and TV stations. Everyone had their own web pages. Now, if your web page isn't in the fast lane, nobody's going to look at it. This changes the internet. So, Andy, go ahead. More on this topic.
Yeah, just very quickly. When you talk about net neutrality, I can't say I have that much to say other than that I favor capitalism and no government regulation. The internet is not owned by the U.S. government. People could do whatever they wanted, and that's fine with me. But to me, what interests me more, Gabriel's talking about the pay-per-view. Look, that's the future. I mean, Bitcoin is changing money. Pay-per-view is the future of pretty much everything. It's the future of the blogging industry. It's the future of entertainment, the future of music, everything. These big services. I mean, look at ESPN. Like, no one wants it anymore. I mean, I might pay $1 a month for it if I felt like it, or 50 cents a month. But these Comcast and Time Warners, they better change quickly, because they got Amazon and Netflix and a whole bunch of other stuff that are offering things better and more modern, and it's going to get even more fragmented and pay-per-view. And so when you see them spending $65 billion of cash for some archaic company, thinking that like the old business model is going to work in the digital age, absolutely ridiculous. This I was thinking of AOL. AOL buying Time Warner was one of the biggest flops in corporate M&A history. Like, it's the poster child. And now AT&T buying Time Warner 20 years later may top it.
It was a great purchase, the AOL Time Warner. Eventually, they even dropped AOL from the name. They were that embarrassed about what happened. But I think that's about it for the topics. Oh, did I have an exit question? No, I think we talked enough about net neutrality companies. I mean, anyway, I go exit question. Are you into the Marvel Comics universe? Do you watch the movies? Have you seen Deadpool 2? Go to Andy and then Gabriel.
No, I'm just into the Star Wars stuff. And actually, what I was told by one of my friends is that the Solo movie is so violent that he wouldn't take his kids to it. So obviously, Disney is going down the channel of, you know, what Batman did and saying, you know, screw the kids. We want to cater it to adults, which is a bit of a shame.
I'm trying to remember. I have a hard judge for violence because I'm not a child or whatever, but I didn't think it was that violent. I felt it was more like just a ride. It was just a chase ride. So it
That's what he said. So I haven't seen it
was
yet.
a lot of depth, but I don't think it was as bad as they're all saying. And I love how a movie that makes $100 million can be considered a failure. But it's an interesting market. Gabriel, Divine, your thoughts on the comics and Star Wars and such?
Well, you know, Marvel is a great comic house, obviously, possibly the most legendary. Gotta love, you know, a lot of their characters, like the Silver Surfer and Galactus. And, you know, it's very cool, this idea of the mutants. And like it's very metaphorical, all the stories, and that's quite interesting. However, I do find that the films have generally tumbled extremely in quality from the very first, not the very first, but sort of the new wave of early Marvel movies, like Batman Begins. Well, I guess Batman is DC, excuse me, from that era of like the first Iron Man movie. So, and I walked out of a Marvel flick because it was just so stupid and so bad. And almost all of them are really terrible. I thought Ant-Man was funny. I didn't see Deadpool because I'm looking at, it's also very San Francisco. All of you Bay Area people, Ant-Man is like the ultimate San Fran commentary comic book movie. But I didn't see Deadpool because he's got a mask on. That just seems so weird for like a main character to have a mask. I can't see his facial expressions. It seems really dumb. I mean, for a comic book, it's fine. But anyways, yeah. I feel like they've kind of gone down. I'm kind of sick of Marvel.
It is tough. A lot of the movies suffer from that big villain fight at the end. And then they also have this problem where you know Spider-Man's going to live.
Formulaic.
Yeah. But they've been a good ride, and some of them are breaking out. They're a little different. Thor Ragnarok, and then I think Deadpool 1 and 2 were good, and of course the big Avengers ones have been pretty good. But yeah, I'm pretty much into the whole series.
Thanks, Dan. You know, we appreciate your donation there, Dan. And Dan says we love you, Thomas. And it's true. And everybody here at the World Crypto Network, even though, of course, we have these fights and everything, obviously behind the scenes, everything's very good natured. And we love Thomas, too. Thanks for doing the show, Thomas.
And thank God that last question after an hour and 20 minutes wasn't, tell Andy to give his stance on altcoins.
We've avoided the altcoins so far, but yes, I am standing up for kind of a traditional view. And I know this is kind of a libertarian audience and conspiracy audience, and everyone's, you know, calling me a statist. That's fine. I mean, everyone else would be saying these things. So we have to say things like, we expect the FCC to regulate things and so forth. But let's go ahead to the story of the week. Andy Hoffman, are you ready? What's been going on this week for you?
Oh my God, I forgot all about that. I've had so much to do.
I could do mine if you're ready. I'll do mine.
I have no story of the week. I'm so exhausted. Just go to all the stuff that I've written and talked about. I'm exhausted.
All right, check out Andy's work. He's been doing some interviews.
And I got to go now because I have to take my daughter somewhere. So it was great having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Andy. We'll see you again soon.
Great. Later.
And Gabriel Divine, your story of the week.
I'm going with a prediction this week. I predict that Tether will implode within the next 3 years. And I predict that this Circle coin, which I hadn't heard of yet, that you or CUSD that you mentioned on the show. Yeah. That sounds like it's got more legs. I wouldn't be surprised if that lasts as long as the USD, which I don't believe will last through the 2020s.
And my story of the week is that I've been having a great time hanging out with you, the audience. We've been doing Bitcoin Talk Show all week. You can add us on Skype at World Crypto Network, all one word. People have been calling in, telling me what they think about Bitcoin, what it was like when they got into Bitcoin. We've heard from people from Ireland, Turkey, Arkansas, all over the world. So it's been great. Make sure that everybody's make sure to subscribe down below. Give us a thumbs up and a share. Just a quick check of the price of Bitcoin is $6,500. I'm going to put the QR code up. If you'd like to donate some Bitcoin to this show, you could do so right now. If you'd like to subscribe monthly at patreon.com/WCN, you could do that for any amount you want, $5 a month, $10 a month. And we just appreciate all your support, and thanks for watching. And until next time, bye-bye.